Jewish law, it's good ways to live your life. Like, for example, Ezahu Asher, Sameach Sameach Bechalkai. Who is a rich man? He who is happy, or she who is happy with his or her lot, right? So this is not a law in the Torah. It's a good way to live your life. You know, a person who's happy with their lot, they could be happy. If you're not happy with your lot, you get 1 million today, you get 10 million tomorrow, you get 1 trillion the next day. If you're not happy with what you have, you're always going to want more. And if you could be happy with what you have, then we could give you more and you could be even more happy. So like that's an example of one of the teachings of ethics of our fathers. It's part of the Mishnah. But here's a general overview of what Mishnah is. The Mishnah was compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. What happened is about approximately 2,000 years ago, around the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. It was the Holocaust of its day. It was terrible. The Jewish sages were being murdered. The Jewish people were being murdered, and the Torah was being forgotten. Now there's something called the oral tradition. The oral tradition are the laws of the Torah that are not written in the Torah, which is most of Judaism. Let me give an example. What is oral tradition? Just about everything we know about being Jewish is oral tradition. For example, it says, well, we know that what do we put on the door of our home? We put a mezuzah, right? If you go into the Torah and you say, how does a mezuzah look? It doesn't tell us. What is written inside the mezuzah? It doesn't tell us. Where to put it, on the right side, on the left side, it doesn't say anything. It just says, right, you should make a sign on your doorpost. It's in the Shema. So how do we know a mezuzah is a mezuzah like we know it and not, a sign like, I don't know, nail a banana to your door. Recently people have been putting duct tape with bananas as art. Maybe that's a mezuzah. How do you know a mezuzah is a mezuzah? So our sages tell us, and Judaism teaches there's something called the oral tradition. God gives the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and with that there's this explanation, and that explanation is oral. It was passed on orally from generation to generation. It was not allowed to be written down. There's a lot of discussion about this in general, but I'm not going to get into the oral tradition, but just to understand that Judaism doesn't just come with the 5 books of Moses, it comes with the explanation. That's the oral tradition. Basically, you can't be a Jew today and not have the oral tradition because you'd come up pretty much with another religion. Listen, there's a lot of religions that look at the Torah, the Bible, and they have completely different picture because they don't have the oral tradition. Just the Bible itself doesn't give you Judaism, just the Torah. So the oral tradition was not allowed to be written down. The idea was it needed to be orally transmitted from teacher to student, from father to son, from mother to daughter, generation, in order to preserve the teachings. And I guess there are many reasons for this that we talk about, but one of them is, when you put something in a book, that's where it ends up. It ends up in a book. But when you require, and from a halachic standpoint or a spiritual standpoint, you say, you can't write this stuff down. This is sacrilegious to write this stuff down. So suddenly people say, well, if I want to know this, there's no notes to cheat on. I gotta study it, and I better make sure my kids know this stuff. And for about 700 years, about 1,300 years, about 1,300 years from when the Torah was given until the destruction of the Second Temple, that's how Judaism stayed alive, orally transmitting the tradition, the oral tradition. And what happens is, with the destruction of the temple and with the politics that were going on at the time, people started to forget the oral tradition. They weren't studying as they should have been. Comes along the leader of the generation. His name is Rabbi, or Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and he writes down what we call the Mishnah. And the Mishnah were short little paragraphs to sort of preserve and capture the oral tradition so we don't forget it. At the time, it was considered to be a terrible thing. How could you write this stuff down? For 1,300 years, we didn't write this down. We never succumbed to make it so easy. And of course, it was very controversial. But, a leader of the Jewish people realizes where we are at what time and what should be done. And so as a result, the Torah is, the oral tradition is written in shorthand format. It's called the Mishnah. The years pass, and even the Mishnah becomes complicated because it's written so concise. So what happens is the sages discuss the Mishnah, and that's called the Gemara. And the study of Mishnah and Gemara is called the Talmud. So there you go. I just gave you a 6-minute overview of what is the oral tradition, what is the Mishnah, what is the Talmud. And now that we know what a Mishnah is, we can learn Pirkei Avot, ethics of our fathers. Now, there's about 60 volumes of Mishnah. But there's only 6 chapters dedicated not to Jewish law, but to good teachings and ethical ways that we should live our lives. So most of the Mishnah talks about law, what's kosher, what's not kosher, how to choose a lulav, how to get rid of your chametz, Jewish law. Ethics of our fathers are 6 chapters that are beautiful advice and wisdom from our sages, Pirkei Avot. And we're going to just choose one Mishnah today. I'm just going to learn one Mishnah with you, and maybe we'll do another one next Wednesday. If you guys like it, if I get decent feedback, we'll come back and explore another Mishnah. Now, why am I sharing Pirkei Avot with you now? I could have done it 6 months ago or in a month, because there's a tradition in Judaism. And that is, there are the weeks between Passover and Shavuot, and there's 6 Shabbosim between Passover, which we just celebrated, and Shavuot, which is coming up. It is a tradition to study ethics of our fathers. And every week we read one chapter. We started this right after Passover, so if some of us don't know what day it is, and it's okay, I understand, I also don't know what day it is, but this Shabbos is going to be the 3rd Shabbos from Pesach, and so we're reading the 3rd chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, that's nice, but why do we read Ethics of Our Fathers the 6 weeks between Passover and Shavuot? Why don't we do it another time? See, I'm a prophet. I know exactly what you're thinking. And the explanation's as follows. Passover celebrates the exodus of Egypt, and Shavuot, 7 weeks later, is the giving of the Torah. The laws of Judaism, the Torah, 7 weeks later. What is the proper preparation to receive the Torah? The proper preparation, our sages say, is not studying laws of Torah, but studying Jewish ethics and values. Why? Because before you start to study Jewish law and Torah or religion, you gotta be a mensch. It's an interesting idea, but it's the truth. The sages tell us, don't get religious if you're not a mensch. And Ethics of Our Fathers is not talking religion, it's talking menschlichkeit. For those who don't know Yiddish, there is no real explanation for mensch. I don't even know how to translate mensch, but mensch means an upstanding, honest person, a good person. So you got to be a mensch before you're going to start religion. And, we see often, it's a common thing. Sometimes you see people who seem to be very religious, but sometimes their menschlichkeit is lacking. The hot story today is a certain community in New York. They were gathering for a funeral. They weren't following social distancing. De Blasio got angry. People are angry at him that he screamed at the Jews. I'm not going to get into what and what not. The bottom line is, here you have a group of people. It's not the larger Jewish community. It's a small segment, but they're not being a mensch. So you could be religious, but you got to be a mensch first. If you're going to be walking around spreading viruses, but you're worried about how long your payas are and how big your beard is, how big your yarmulke is, and how strict your kosher is, but you're walking around and God forbid people could be sick, or even worse, people could die as a result, this is not menschlichkeit. So says our sages, we're preparing for the giving of the Torah, the Jewish religion. As a preparation, we're going to study ethics of our fathers because we're going to teach you how to be a mensch. To be a mensch, to be a decent human being has to come first. So by the way, one more nugget of history. Actually, if you look at these chapters, there are actually only 5 chapters of Pirkei Avot in Mishnah. There aren't 6. But because the sages wanted to fit this learning to work for the 6 weeks, they actually added an extra chapter. The last chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers is actually a compilation of various teachings found throughout the Mishnah, and they sort of, bulked it together, and that's the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot. So there you have it, my friends. A quick overview of the history of the oral tradition and what Pirkei Avot's Ethics of Our Fathers are, and why do we do that between Passover and Shavuot. And now with that, let's jump in to the one Mishnah. We're going to go to the 3rd chapter. We're going to go to Mishnah 7. I'm going to share the screen for those who don't have the printouts. Very high tech here. Let's see if I could share the screen. Share. All right, friends. Let's see. Can you see? Can you see the text? Blocked, or can you see? You see the whole thing? Or is it being cut off?
No, you can see the whole thing.
I can see it now.
Okay. All right. And just don't mind mute yourselves now. So here we go. So here's the Mishnah. Let's jump right into it. Rabbi Eliezer of Bartosa would say, give him what is his for you, and what is yours are his. As David says, for everything comes from you, and from your hand we have given to you. All right, what is this talking about? This is talking about the mitzvah of charity. Mitzvah of charity doesn't make you Jewish. A human being with a good heart should be giving charity. And it's a universal mitzvah. So it belongs in Pirkei Avot. It belongs it's menschlichkeit. We have to give charity. There are people that are hurting. There are people that are in need. And so this is the Rebbe Lazar is saying to give charity. But let's break down this Mishnah and see what it's talking about. I'm going to get into the actual language in a moment, but here's first of all a general concept about charity that some of you might have heard before, but it's integral to understand this before we talk about Jewish charity. I don't like the word charity. It's a terrible translation, charity. In Judaism, the word tzedakah comes from the word tzedek, which means righteousness. And that's more of an accurate translation of the word charity, tzedakah. And the reason is, what is charity? When I say charity, what is it? It's like, I got all this cash, right? I'm sitting on a lot of cash. I'm feeling good about myself. And I see someone else is lacking or they're hurting or they're in trouble. So I don't have to help this person. But what I'm going to do is do something to help this person out of my kindness. I don't have to help you, but I'm going to help you. But that's not the Jewish view. The Jewish view is to give tzedakah is not a choice, but it's a tzedek, it's righteousness, it's an obligation. Why is that? And we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm going to ask everyone to pause. I have someone just walked into my office. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back, and I apologize. Thank you. And I'm back. All right. So the word in Judaism, the concept of tzedakah is God gave us everything we have, and we're obligated to give a certain amount of charity. So if I give charity, I really shouldn't get a parade, and I shouldn't get a standing ovation. I could get a smile. It's really what I'm supposed to do as an ethical being, to think of those that have less than me and to help them out. So charity is not the right explanation. And the sages tell us, picture, if I'm a banker, right? Let's say I'm a banker. Today we're dealing a lot with banks, PPP loans and everything. So if I'm a banker and someone calls me up on the phone and says, okay, I want you to transfer a certain amount of money from my account to so-and-so, right? If I'm the banker, I do it. Now, do I get some kind of special reward for doing what I did? No, I did my job. It's not my money. So how Judaism looks at it, everything we have is not really ours. What we have belongs to Hashem. And as a result, Hashem gave it to us, and we are God's steward to do goodness and kindness. Obviously, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our family. But aside from that, Hashem gave us the responsibility, at least 10% of what we own has to be used to make the world a better place. So that's a little background on the Jewish view of charity. There's a cute story told about the Apter Rav, Rabbi Avram Yeshua Herschel of Apt, and he lived from 1748 to 1825. And as a rabbi of a community, there are many times needs, people that need help. And the rabbi called up a particular, follower of his, a very wealthy man, and said, we'll call him Moshe. He said, Moshe, I'd like you to give 200 rubles to so-and-so who's going through a very, very hard time, and we need to raise some funds. So this Reb Moshe was, had his money tied up, and he didn't want to, move his money around. So conveniently, he didn't hear what the rabbi said, or he forgot. This is how the story goes. Anyway, a few weeks pass, and suddenly the man's business takes a turn for the worst, and suddenly he starts to lose he loses everything. And he realizes something's happening here. This is a religious man, a spiritual man, and when things happen in his life, he wants to find the reason, and he says, you know what it was? The Rebbe asked me to do a mitzvah, and I wasn't willing to do it. I pretended I didn't hear him, and I didn't follow through. And so he went to the Rebbe, and he cried to him. He says, I messed up. I should have listened to you. I'm sorry, but why such a harsh punishment? I was a wealthy man, and I lost everything now. Why such a harsh punishment? And this is the Rebbe of Apt's answer, the Apter Rav's answer to him. He says, it's not a punishment. You should know that there's a certain amount of money God gave towards my projects in this world. There are people that are poor, there are people that are suffering, there are people that are in trouble. And as a community leader, I try to make sure the widow, the orphan, and those in need are taken care of. But I'm too busy to handle and manage the money because I have to run a community. I wish to study Torah. I wish to pray. So God allowed me to have different stewards who manage the funds, the communal funds for him. You were very wealthy because God believed that you had a large enough heart to care about those that were in need. The moment that you weren't doing your job, Hashem didn't punish you. He simply took the funds and gave it to someone else who's going to be a better steward from his funds. Anyway, this is the story. It's a different way to look at what we have. We could look at what we have as I have what I have because I'm so smart, I'm so talented, I'm so amazing, I'm so brilliant, and that's why. And that's probably, somewhat true. People who are successful are pretty brilliant many times. But at the end of the day, we know you don't only need smarts, you don't only need brains, you also need not only seichel, but a little bit of mazel. You need a little mazel, and the mazel is the blessing from above. And the mazel is given to us when we know that what we're supposed to do with the blessings that we have. So this is how Judaism looks at wealth and at the idea of charity. It's not charity, but it's righteousness. It's the right thing to do. But this idea is much bigger, our sages tell us. So let's look at the Mishnah one more time. So let's read the Mishnah on a simple level. I just gave background. Let's read it. Rabbi Elazar of Bartoisa says, give him what is his for you, and what is yours are his. So we're talking about Hashem. Give God what is his, because you are his, and what you own is his as well. All right? For as David says, for everything comes from you, and from your hand we have given to you. But this is a much bigger idea. This is not only talking about money. This is talking about everything we have in our lives. Each one of us has many talents. This one's a musician. That one's an artist. This one could tell a good joke. That one knows how to build, right? Everyone has different talents in their life. The talents we have, our sages are telling us. So this mission is not only talking about finances, it's talking about our talents. When I have a talent, when God blessed me with a special ability, something unique, I have to remember that Hashem gave that to me. And it's not really mine. It's a gift that I'm meant to use to make the world a better place. Many times people walk around, what is my purpose? What is my calling? What is my purpose? What is my calling? It's a tough thing. Young people, college, people are trying to figure out what their purpose is, what their calling is. Some people are retired. They're still trying to figure out their purpose and their calling. It's good. It's healthy. It's good to think about why am I here? What's it all about? All this is good. But a tip that I give people when people are trying to find their calling and their purpose in life is, what are your talents? What are your gifts? Because that's a good indication of what Hashem is expecting from you in this world. If you have the ability to, you're a musician or you're an artist, very possibly that your purpose in this world and your mission, your calling could be connected to your talent. Why? Because from this perspective, everything we have comes from Hashem. So Hashem chose to give you a particular talent. It's because Hashem expects you to use that to make the world a better place. So it's not that like, oh, I just happen to be good at this. When I find that I'm good at something or I have a unique ability, this one's good at business, and this one's good at talking to people and making people feel better. This one's could be a good therapist. This is a good indication of what God expects of you, and he's given you the tools of what you need for your calling, your purpose in life. So this Mishnah is bigger than finances. This Mishnah is talking about everything we have. The things, the physical objects we own, the talents we have. If we have it in our life, somehow we have to think, how can this be used to make the world a better place? You know, the Mishnah has many layers, many levels of understanding. Like an onion has many layers. When you study Torah, you're meant to look at the verse sometimes on a simple layer, a simple level. And also, we're supposed to dig deeper and try to find more meaning. You know, the Talmud says that in Jeremiah, it says, my words are like fire, says Hashem, and like a hammer that shatters a stone. What does that mean? It's a very cryptic verse. What does it mean? What it means is, you know, a stone is one stone until you take a hammer to it. Now it's many stones. Just one line, one verse in the Torah. It's not meant to have just one simple meaning. But when we've done it in many of our classes, we've taken one verse and we've studied it and dug deeper and deeper. And we realize how there are many, many lessons to learn from this verse. It's not just the one teaching. You know, like a stone to be shattered into many, many stones. One verse could be shattered, so to say, into many, many lessons, many, many teachings. So here's a question that's asked on this verse. It makes sense, the first part, right? Give him what is his for you, right? So we're talking about with God, with Rabbi Lezer is saying, give God what is his, which means don't take everything you have for yourself. Charity, help the world, make the world a better place. And then it says, for you, and what is yours are his. So what's the purpose of the second part of the pasuk? What's for you are his, and what is yours is his. Well, obviously, if God gave it to you, it's his, it's not yours. What does it mean? What's yours is his. So I'll tell you an interesting question someone once asked a rabbi. It's actually a true story. You know what? I'm going to go to another point and then come back to this. I apologize. By the way, just to touch on this idea that all our gifts come from Hashem, there's an interesting saying. We say that in the Torah tells us that who was the most humble man who ever lived? Moshe. Moses, right? Remember Moses? The Torah tells us he's the most humble man to ever live. So the question is asked, is that really possible? Somebody who was so successful in their life should be the most humble to ever live? You know, maybe he'll be humble, but the most humble? How's that possible? Moshe's the one that took down Egypt, 10 plagues, splits the sea, of course, you know, with God, gives the Torah on Mount Sinai, leads the Jews through the desert. I mean, Moses is the greatest. Moshe's the greatest of the great, yet he's the most humble man that ever lived. How's that possible? So the Rabbi gives an interesting explanation as follows. He says, Moshe knew his greatness. He wasn't like being falsely humble, like, oh, I'm so humble. He knew what he did. He knew that his accomplishments. However, he also realized that everything that he did and his blessings came from Hashem. And so he honestly believed, and it wasn't, you know, he honestly believed, had these talents and abilities been given to another person, that person would have done what he did and maybe even greater. So this is what it means, Moshe is the most humble. He knew what he accomplished. He knew the changes he brought to the world. He saw that he took a nation of slaves out of Egypt and brought them to freedom. But at the same time, he also knew that this is a gift that God gave him. It wasn't his own accomplishment. So this, we could draw on that into our own lives as well. Thank God each and every one of us has unique and beautiful talents. One person's different than another person. And we're talking about trying to use these talents to make the world a better place, but also to have a humility and to realize it's not only because I'm so talented, it's not only because I'm so smart, it's because Hashem entrusted this to me. It's actually a big responsibility too, if you think about it. How many people have talents and those talents are just going to waste? How many people do you know who have unique abilities and gifts, but they never got their act together? And I really don't want to sound harsh or like I'm giving mussar to anyone here. It's not my intention. It's just an honest a moment of introspection here. And I think we all should really ask ourselves, am I using my talents to the fullest? God gave me talents. Am I using them to change the world? Am I going full force? Am I living life fully? Unfortunately, many people could look, if they're honest with themselves and look in the mirror, they realize we have ways to go. And so this is an important thought to think about as well. And make resolutions, real concrete resolutions, what I could do to get out there and start living life fully and start using my gifts and doing something good for the world with it. Don't let your talents and gifts and abilities collect too much dust. As Ethics of Our Fathers says, if not now, im lo yachshav emasai. If not now, when? Okay, moving right along. The sages take this idea, everything that we have, right, our money, our talents, use it for God, but the sages take it to another level. They say, even the things that we own, the stuff that we own, the physical that we own, that also is, that also comes from God and is meant to be used for a purpose. You ever heard the concept of bashert? I can see you guys in the camera. Have you ever heard the word bashert? I see some of you shaking your head. Yeah. So bashert means destined. We use it in, when a couple gets married, we say bashert, it was destined. It was meant to be. It was preordained. These two souls are two halves of one soul, and they come together, they get married. Oh, beautiful, romantic, it's bashert. The concept of bashert in the Kabbalah actually is used not only for people that are destined for each other, but the very objects that we own. And I'm talking about your car. I'm talking about your house. I'm talking about your lawnmower. Okay? I'm talking about your ladder, your screwdriver. I'm talking about your shoes and your sports jacket. I'm talking about your stuff, the things we own, the pencils, the pens, the stuff. You know, the stuff you end up throwing in a yard sale eventually because we always get too much stuff eventually. Once upon a time, people didn't have stuff. Today, we don't know what to do with our stuff. But the Kabbalah tells us, Rabbi, the Arizal tells us, the stuff we have in our lives is actually bashert for us. It's destined for us. There are sparks of holiness trapped in all physical objects. I'm going to exhibit A. I'm going to make it really simple. See this pencil? Sorry, this pen. This pen is not just any pen. It says Planet Fitness. Maybe it's a sign for me. The gyms are closed. Not a sign. Okay. See this pen? This pen didn't just end up on my desk, but according to the Kabbalah, this physical pen was destined for me to be used in my hand for a certain amount of time. There are sparks of holiness trapped in this pen. And if I use this pen, and as a result, the world is better, lives are enhanced, goodness, more goodness spreads in the world as a result of using this pen, my soul has the ability to free those trapped sparks, and the pen's purpose is realized. It sounds like some far out there stuff, but this is what the Kabbalah says. It's unbelievable. The stuff we have, God gave it to us, not just by accident, but because there is a purpose that we need to realize with that thing in the world. So let's talk about my car. My car could be something I use just for myself. My car could be something that I shut myself off from the world. I roll up the windows, I turn on the air conditioner, I turn up the music, and I live my own private life. And I live a selfish existence, God forbid. My car is not being, the sparks of holiness are not being released from that car. And it's not, its purpose, its potential is not being realized. However, if that car takes me to work and the income I make at my work, I use, I give tzedakah, and I make the world a better place, suddenly that car is elevated. That very car becomes holy. And guess what? The fact that I'm driving my car means Hashem wants that particular car to be used by me. Not a different car. It's another way of looking at our lives. I live in a house. That means that house is destined for me, for my soul to elevate. When that house, the doors are open and friends are welcome for a Shabbos meal. Somebody in troubles or going through a hard time is invited to sit on the couch and schmooze. When that house, if someone needs a place to stay and I help them out, that house is being elevated. When I put a mezuzah on that door, the house is not just a home anymore, it becomes holy, it becomes a sanctuary. So the very physical objects we own, the Kabbalah tells us, is bashert for me. And your house is bashert for you. And guess what? You decide to move one day, and now you end up in another house. So one way to look at it is, well, you got a promotion in your job, and now you got a bigger house, mazel tov. Or God forbid, the stock market tanks, and now you have to sell your house, oy vey, and get a smaller one. That's looking at it on a physical plane, but on a spiritual level, there's a whole different way to look at it. It's the universe, God, telling us, guess what? Congratulations. You finished elevating, or your opportunity to elevate that house has come to an end. And guess what? For someone else to live there. Another soul is bashert to connect to that house or that car. It's a whole different way of looking at things. So again, the Mishnah says what is mine is really his. It's talking about also the things I own. My pen, my car, my house. It belongs to Hashem. And we have an opportunity to use it. Guess what? I just put my car on Craigslist. I want to sell it. I think I want to sell it because, I need more miles, because I want a different design. It might be true, but something else is happening spiritually, our sages tell us. And the Kabbalah says that when you think you're selling your car, it's really your soul telling you something you may not know consciously, but subconsciously, your soul is telling you, guess what? You finished your job with this object. It's time to elevate something else. So now, with this new perspective about Bashert, about the things I own, they really belong to Hashem. Let's think to ourselves, what do I own? What do I have? What's in my house? How can I use these things to make the world a better place? Maybe I have a laptop. Maybe I could use it to give a Torah class. Hey, that's a good idea. Maybe I have a computer. I could study some classes on Chabad.org. I have a cell phone. I could sit for hours with no purpose on Facebook and rot my brain away, God forbid. Or maybe I could pick it up and think about individuals who might be living alone during this difficult time of coronavirus. And maybe I could every day dedicate 10 minutes, 15 minutes to call people, to bring a smile to someone's face. Well, guess what? That phone is a holy object. You know the story about Jacob struggling with the angel of Esav? You remember that story from the Bible, from the Torah? It was the day before Esav was supposed to meet his brother. After all these years, Esav, and that night he's alone. He crosses the river and he struggles with a stranger. It's Esav's angel. You know the story, right? Well, what was he doing alone at night on the other side of the river? What was he doing there? Our sages tell us he went to gather pachim katanim, small vessels. He was traveling with his family, and he remembered they crossed the river. This is the middle of the night, and he remembered there's some vessels, some pots, some pans, some cutlery. It's on the other side of the river, and he goes in the middle of the night by himself to get these pots and pans. It's dangerous to travel by yourself in the desert, in the wilderness. What was he doing? So the sages jump in here and they explain that a tzaddik, a spiritual person, knows and can see the sparks of holiness trapped in the stuff they own. So Jacob, Yaakov, the tzaddik, is traveling and he realizes he left some pots and pans. And he realized that he wasn't done elevating the sparks of holiness in those pots and pans. Again, how do you do that? I don't know. You make some chicken soup for someone who's sick. You use it to make the world a better place. He understood that he didn't finish his mission with those objects, those items. Anyway, so if you're familiar with the story, if you ever read it, and he goes back in the middle of the night to get these pots and pans, it doesn't make any sense, but our sages explained the meaning of why he felt he had to get it. He was a very wealthy man. He didn't care about some earthenware vessels. It wasn't, today we throw things out all the time. Everything's disposable. Today's world, things are disposable. Back then, things were less disposable, but Jacob was extremely wealthy. He was traveled with a tremendous amount of servants and cattle. He didn't need these pots. He didn't need to risk his life, especially since the next morning he has to meet his brother and it's life and death. But he understood that he wasn't done with the things he had. So anyway, back to our lives. We own stuff. Meditation for the week. And I'm going to think about this too. What stuff do I have? And how can I use those things to make the world a better place? And maybe some of the things I have, I don't even need. And by giving them to someone who needs them, those objects are realizing their potential and a mitzvah was performed. Okay. So here's a question. We said the things we have and the money we have and the talents we have, they belong to Hashem. So we're not really giving them as charity, but we're the banker. We're distributing Hashem's wealth. And we're honored and blessed to be able to do that. Fine. Well, if it's not really mine, what's the point? Do I get any credit if I do any tzedakah? If I give to charity, do I get any credit? I didn't give anything of myself, my money. The banker doesn't get credit for giving. When I ask the banker, hey, can you give money to so-and-so? And he does it. He doesn't get any credit. It's not his money. So when I give tzedakah, do I get any real credit? There's a cute story actually found in Sefer Chassidim. It's a mystical work by Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. He lived from 1150 to 1217. Anyway, a certain Jew came over to him, and he found himself in a difficult situation. The ruler, the Gentile ruler at that time, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, was forcing him to pay a large sum of money, and it was unethical for no reason, just because he was Jewish, to a certain person. So he came to Rabbi Yehuda and he says, they're going to make me swear in court. He said, the only way I could get out of giving this large sum of money away is if I swear in court that I don't have the money. Like in those days, they didn't have bank accounts that, the IRS could just go in and see what you got. Then you could hide your money in your mattress and still get away with it, In those days, he had a pile of gold in his basement. If no one found it, no one knew about it. So if he was willing to swear that he didn't have the money, the ruler, the anti-Semitic ruler, would get off his back. So he came to a Rabbi Yehuda, and he says, is it okay that I swear that I don't have the money? And technically, I'm not really lying. Why? Because it's not really my money anyway, it's God's money. So if I get up in the court and I say, I swear that I don't have X amount of money, I'm not really lying, I'm telling the truth, because it belongs to God, it's not even mine. Anyway, the rabbis did not let him lie, or actually it is a lie, did not let him lie that way. The fact that the verse says, what is yours is his, teaches us another idea, and that is, so again, the question is it mine or is it not mine? We said it's God's. Is it mine or it's not mine? Why does it say what's yours is his? We just said it's not mine to begin with. How do we understand this? So the sages explain it is God's, but it's also yours in some way. Why? Because as a human being, we have the ability of free choice. Human beings have free choice. So even though it does belong to God, but if I don't decide to share my blessings, the things I have with other people, it's not going to happen. So the fact that I use my free choice to do the right thing, actually, at that moment, makes it mine. So it's not like Hashem owns it and I don't have a choice. Hashem owns it, but I have a choice every day. Am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to do the selfish thing? Am I going to do the loving thing, or am I going to do, the thing that's makes my personal life better? I have a choice. I have a struggle. The fact that I have the ability to overcome and give the tzedakah. At that moment, I made the mitzvah mine. The funds are not mine, but I made the mitzvah mine because God gave us free choice. Human beings are the only creations that truly have free choice. Angels don't have free choice. In a lot of religion, there's a lot of talk about angels. I think I saw an angel. I felt an angel. There's a lot of talk about angels. Ooh, angels. In Judaism, we don't really talk about angels. Abraham is visited by angels. But in Judaism, we don't really talk about angels. We're not really so fascinated by angels. Not that they don't exist. They exist. But guess what? We're not so impressed with an angel. Because an angel cannot sin. An angel can't do something wrong because an angel has no free choice. An angel is like God's computer programs that make the world go round. You know? Like if I have a calculator and I do a really, really complicated equation and I hit enter and it gives me the answer, I don't say, oh, what a great calculator. You're so brilliant, right? No, because the calculator can't make a mistake. It's perfect. It's a calculator. It was made to give me the answer. When I go to a human being and I give them the same equation and they think for a moment, they give me the answer, I say, oh, wow, that's amazing because human beings are not perfect and human beings have free choice. We could focus on what we should or not. So angels in Judaism we're not so impressed with. God created beings that are spiritual, that don't have free choice and do exactly what they're told. Cool. I bet if I saw an angel, I'd be like, that was pretty freaky or awesome. But the angel itself, unto itself, it doesn't have anything. But a human being, we have free choice. When we do the right thing, it's truly beautiful. When a person pushes away their selfishness, when a person sacrifices their own comfort because they care about someone else's needs, because they care about someone else's, the things other people need in their life, what happens is, it's a beautiful thing. It's a sacrifice. Angels don't sacrifice. They do exactly what they're told. And by the way, a real tzaddik doesn't even have a struggle between good and evil, that Tanya says. A real tzaddik is someone like, somewhat like an angel that only does good, doesn't struggle. So the truth is, a human being that struggles in their life, has free choice, and then does the right thing. Now that's impressive. When an angel does something, God's not impressed. When a human being is struggling in their heart to do the right thing, the wrong thing, the right thing, the wrong thing, they overcome, they do the right thing. They make a sacrifice for the good of someone else, to do a mitzvah, to care, to love. At that moment, God literally stops everything and looks to the billions and trillions and infinite amount of angels out there and smiles and says, have you ever seen something so beautiful in your life? Human being with struggles, we're imperfect. Free choice, we could do the wrong thing and we do the right thing. Now that's impressive. So that's why this Mishnah seems to have a contradiction. On one hand, we say it's all God's, but then it says what's yours is God's. What does it mean it's yours? It's also ours. Because when we choose to do the right thing, at that moment, it becomes ours. Beautiful, beautiful story. I think it's told about one of the Rothschilds. If it's someone else and you know who the story's about, you're welcome to chime in here. Story about this Jewish fellow that did a lot of business with a Gentile count. And he had a lot of partnerships with him. And one time they were sitting around after a business deal and he says, "Nu, tell me, what are you worth? How much you got? Are we talking about, 100 million, 200 million, talking about $1 trillion? Like, how wealthy are you? Let's talk about what we're worth." So the Jewish fellow closes his eyes for a moment to make a calculation, and he gives a certain number. He says, "This is what I'm worth. This is what I have." To be more correct, he says, "This is what I have," and he gives him a number. And this Gentile count gets very angry at him. And he says, "What are you, mocking me? We're business partners. What are you, making a joke? You think you have to hide things from me? I know just in the business dealings that I do with you and the real estate that I know you own many, many times more than that number that you just told me." So this Jewish fellow turns to him and says, no, you don't understand. You didn't ask me how much money is in my bank account. You didn't ask me how much money or how much funds I have in my portfolio. You asked me, what do you have? And the truth is, he says, I don't count any of the physical money I have as something I really, truly have. The number I gave you is the exact number of, the exact amount of money that I've given to charity over my business career. That is truly mine, what I gave to charity. The forest I own, here today, tomorrow, lightning can strike and the forest could burn down. The ships I have at sea, today they're worth X. Tomorrow there could be pirates. There could be a storm and they could all sink and could be worth nothing. The money in my portfolio is not mine, he says. You want to know what I have? You want to know what's mine? The only thing that I could really take with me, the only thing that's really mine is what I give away to tzedakah. That is mine forever. That is mine. And this count is very impressed and he apologizes and he says, I learned a very important lesson, Rabbi. So that's what the Mishnah is saying here. Unbelievable. There's no extra words. It looks like it's an extra word. Give him what is his for you, and what is yours are his. Why does it say what is yours is his? The truth is, eventually, the things we give to tzedakah, the things we use for others, that becomes ours. That's the only thing we really, really have. You could go onto my, you could follow my YouTube or Facebook account. There's a beautiful story I shared about the wealthy man who wanted to be buried with his socks. Anyone heard the story? You could go on to it brings home the same point, that we can't take anything with us from this world, not even a pair of socks. Okay. I'm going to finish up this class. Oh, looks like we're time's up. Just want to take a moment to share with you a little bit about the author, right? We said this Mishnah is Rabbi Lazar. Little something about the author. Rabbi Lazar Vatosa, or Rabbi Lazar ben Yehuda is his name, lived in a land in Israel at the beginning of the 2nd century of the Common Era. He was a disciple of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chanina, who was a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva. The Talmud tells an interesting story, and I'll share it with you. This is the last point, and then we'll finish up the class. The Talmud tells the following story about Rabbi Lazar that will give you an idea of who he was, and then you'll understand why he wrote this Mishnah. Like, why did he write this Mishnah? Why didn't someone else write it? It says, whenever the collectors of charity caught sight of Rabbi Lazar, they would hide themselves from him, because he was in the habit of giving away to them all that he had. Okay? The beggars and the paupers, I guess they were mentioned too, and they realized, oh no, Rabbi Lazar's going to come, he's going to take the shirt off his back. You heard the expression, take the shirt off his back. This Rabbi Lazar would literally give everything. So the poor people didn't want to see him because they were like, oh, okay, Rabbi, it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. I can't deal with you. Give me something. Don't give me everything. One day he was going to the market to purchase the wedding dowry for his daughter. When the collectors of charity caught sight of him, they hid themselves from him. But he saw them, and he runs after them, and he says, I implore you, tell me, on what mission are you engaged? And they replied, we're raising funds for the marriage of 2 orphans. Said he to them, I swear they must take a precedence over my daughter. And he took all he had and he gave it to them. he was left with only one zuz. What's a zuz? It's like $1. He was left with $1. When he came home, he bought a little bit of wheat with that one zuz, and he put it in his granary. Is it called a granary? A granary where you put the wheat? I don't know. And when his wife returned home, she asked her daughter, "What did your father bring home?" She replied, "He has put in the granary all that he bought." She went to open the door, and she found that it was so full of wheat that the wheat protruded through the hinges of the door sockets, and the doors would not open on his account. The daughter then went to the study hall and said to him, "Come and see what your friend has done for you." Meaning, come look what God did for you. So I guess it's a miraculous story. He put a little bit of wheat in the room, and they came back, and it was overflowing. Whereupon he said to her, "I swear that the wealth shall be to you as consecrated property," which means holy property, "and you shall have no more right to share in it, in them than any poor person in Israel." Basically, he's blessing his daughter. You should be just as wealthy as I am, but just remember that it belongs to the poor person just like it belongs to you. So anyway, it's a nice story from the Talmud about this Rebbe Lezer. I hope you appreciated and enjoyed our discussion today. I'm going to unmute everyone, and I'm happy to hear some questions, some comments. And next week we'll do another mission. Okay, I hear you guys. How you doing? Thank you. By the way, you're not supposed to be like Rebbe Lezer. We're not supposed to give everything away. He was a tzaddik. He was on a different level. We're actually not supposed to give more than 20% to charity. Really. Because Hashem wants us to remain productive. Don't give away the chicken. Give away the egg. So that's important thing to. I've seen sometimes people that maybe they feel guilty or whatever. They want to give like charity to the level where it's going to hurt them.